Morning, Speaker. Speaker, I present the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Amendment, Making Gambling Businesses Accountable Bill 2022 and the explanatory memorandum.
Call the clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to regulate suspicious gambling activities and for related purposes.
I call the member for Clark.
I move that this bill be now read a second time. Speaker, the bill amends relevant legislation to put a positive obligation on gambling companies to report to AUSTRAC if they have any reason to suspect a person is paying for a gambling service with money that they've obtained illegally. And where a bettor has paid for a gambling service using funds they did obtain illegally, the bill enables the federal court to order the gambling company to compensate the injured party for their loss. In other words, the bill will reduce the opportunity for gambling companies to profit from the misfortune of others and ensure that gambling entities are held accountable by preventing them profiting from illegal behaviour in particular. It targets the unconscionable conduct of gambling companies to ensure that the money they receive from bettors has not been obtained at the misfortune of innocent parties. Speaker, by way of background, Australians continue to be the world's biggest gambling losers per capita. Indeed, according to the latest annual figures of Australian gambling statistics, Australians lost over $25 billion in 2018-2019, which equates to $1,276 per person, for every person. And, Speaker, it's getting worse. Indeed, according to the Australian Institute of Family Studies report into gambling in Australia during COVID, dated October 2020, 1 in 3 survey participants signed up for a new online betting account during the early days of the pandemic. And even with limited access to venues, overall, participants were gambling more often. Indeed, the proportion who gambled 4 or more times a week increased from 23% to 32%. Of particular concern, 79% of participants were classified as being at risk of or already experiencing gambling-related harm. And the Australian Communications and Media Authority's annual consumer survey, more recently in 2022, found that online gambling increased significantly between 2020 and 2021. Indeed, the percentage of Australians who participated in online gambling was sitting steady at approximately 8% up until 2020, but this increased dramatically to 11% in 2021. Moreover, 16% of those surveyed reported gambling at a higher frequency than before the pandemic. Now, Speaker, according to other research, and this comes really to the essence of the bill, there is a clear correlation between problem gambling and crime. Moreover, the more complex, prolonged and persistent the gambling problem, the more likely that a crime will be committed. But while there is a growing understanding that gambling addiction is a behavioural disorder, this has not been translated into sentencing by the courts. Indeed, problem gambling is bizarrely not considered to be a mitigating factor in sentencing in the same way that mental health problems or drug and alcohol addiction are. At this point, Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge Mr Gavin Fenech, who is the inspiration for this bill and who has helped to develop it. Now, Gavin is a former financial advisor who lost more than $8 million of his clients' money through gambling after he was targeted by 3 of the country's biggest online betting agencies. Yes, Gavin understands he did the wrong thing and takes full responsibility for his actions and will accept any punishment meted out by the courts without appeal. But he feels he is not the only one to blame, and he is right, Speaker, considering the predatory practices of the gambling companies as they took advantage of Gavin's gambling addiction. First, there was Tabcorp, where Gavin was quickly promoted to VIP status, assigned a personal customer service manager and offered special treatment, including events, experiences and bonus money to bet with. And of course they did, because Gavin was gambling and losing big time. Indeed, from September 2016 to June 2018, there were 194 times where he deposited $10,000 or more into his tab account, and 23 times where he made a withdrawal of more than $10,000 from his account, 10 of which were for $50,000. But as Gavin continued to lose more and more money, rather than offering him support, Tabcorp fuelled his growing addiction with bonus money and tickets to sporting events to encourage his gambling. And all the while, Tabcorp never intervened, never asked Gavin for proof of funds, never asked for proof of income, never showed the slightest interest in where all the money was coming from, until it was too late and Gavin had lost almost $4 million. Yes, his tab account was eventually frozen, but this didn't stop the predatory gambling companies to continue to knock on his door. Next, there was Ladbrokes. About 3 weeks after his Tabcorp account was frozen, Gavin was contacted by representatives from that company, completely out of the blue, who offered to sign Gavin up with a, quote, superior experience, unquote, including thousands of dollars in bonus bets. When Gavin disclosed that his Tabcorp account had been frozen, the Ladbrokes representative facilitated an account under a false name. He was never asked for identification, nor again for proof of income. And then there was BetEasy. A few months after signing with Ladbrokes, where he lost close to $700,000, Gavin was again contacted out of the blue by gambling company BetEasy, who set up an account for Gavin and gave him $50,000 in free bonus bets, which he lost within the space of 45 minutes. Over the next 16 months, Gavin lost approximately $3.6 million with BetEasy. And again, BetEasy never asked him for proof of income and only checked his identification in the last 2 months of his gambling with that company. Which brings me back to the bill. Speaker, Gavin Phaneuf believes, and I agree with him, that he was deliberately targeted by the gambling companies for his addiction. Of course the betting agencies would have known that Gavin's gambling was suspicious, because their software tracks certain behaviour and hunts down the most vulnerable so they can be groomed and milked of every dollar they have and can steal. And this must stop, because gambling companies are preying on the financially and emotionally vulnerable and must be held accountable for their unconscionable and unethical behaviour. So while I in no way condone Gavin's behaviour, I do acknowledge that an addict by definition has lost control of their behaviour, and that the bigger crims are those that knowingly create the addiction in the first place. At least Gavin's prepared to try and do something about it, and good on him for that, Speaker. I now invite the member for Mayo, who is seconding the bill, to contribute to the debate in my remaining time.